الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Respected Sadr Sahib, respected Nazme Ala of the Ijtema and Majlis Amla and all the participants of this Ijtema, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be here with you. In fact, whilst we were waiting outside, I was reminiscing with Sadr Sahib the very early Ijtemas that took place in this country. And one of my very oldest memory was in the 1960s when we had one of our first Ijtemas, which was held on Wimbledon Common near a place called the Windmill. Some of you might know the place. And it was just done in the open ground with just a handful of young Khuddam, and Hazrat Chaudhry Zafullah Khan Sahib came and did the prize distribution. And from those humble beginnings, by the grace and blessing of Allah, each year we see the Jamaat growing from strength to strength. And Alhamdulillah, of course, the whole backbone of the Jamaat is Majlis Khuddam Lahore. And each year, by the grace of Allah, we are seeing how this Majlis is progressing from strength to strength. Now, also, I remember when Khilafat first came to this country, Hazrat Khalif Masih Rabi Rahimahullah, when he came, he migrated from Pakistan. We were a very small Jamaat here, a handful of families. And most of the people who were here, especially Khuddam Lahudiyya, we were people who had been born outside Pakistan where the Markaz was. And our training that took place in the UK was either done by our parents, or at that time Hazrat Chaudhry Zafullah Khan Sahib used to be our mentor, and he would hold classes for us. So when Hazrat came to this country, he realized that the young Khuddam who existed here were good Ahmadi Muslims, but their understanding of the Nizam was very limited. So literally he started from zero to start training us about the Nizam. And basically, he, by getting involved in our everyday lives, Huzur has trained us. And now, by the grace of Allah, the Khuddam who are growing up now are growing up with the benefit of having Khilafat in this country. So your understanding of the Nizam should be very good and very strong. You should be able to understand Nizam-e-Jamaat. See, being an Ahmadi Muslim is one thing, and understanding the Nizam is a separate thing. And the two are bonded together through Khilafat Ahmadiyya. So, this is something that our young Khuddam and Iqbal should understand what Nizam is. Secondly, these Ijtemas, the fundamental purpose of holding these Ijtemas is to bring all of the Khuddam and Iqbal together so that they can have a spiritual experience. And in this country in particular, you are very, very fortunate that you have Hazrat Khalif Masih residing in this country. So the spiritual experience that you will gain during this Ijtema is going to be far superior than anything else that any of your contemporaries around the world would experience. So when you sit in these gatherings with Khilafat, you find that the angels of Allah descend on those congregations, and those congregations are particularly blessed. Therefore, what you should do when you're here is to make sure that you fully get absorbed in the spiritual aspect of this Ijtema. Of course, academic and sports events will also take place, but part of this Ijtema is to enrich your spirituality. Now, Hazrat Khalifah Masih Sani Raziyallahu Anhu was particularly concerned regarding the organization and training of Ahmadi youth. And while laying the foundation of Majlis Qudamlandia, Hazur Aqdas said that I have an overall view of things in my mind, and one part is Qudamlandia. This is a spiritual training and spiritual education. Today is the time for training of young men, and the period of training is a silent period. People assume that nothing is happening, but when after receiving the training, the nation steps up in the field of action, and then the world sees the result. And indeed, we have already started seeing those results today, that Zurek was mentioned many, many years ago. And in reality, a living nation that rises with the rising of the hand and sits down when the hand is lowered can make great change in this world. Now, you will remember when we had the election of Zuriyaqtas at Masjid Fazl, when Hazur was inside the mosque after his election, and Hazur asked people inside the mosque to sit down, and those views were captured by MKA, that thousands of people outside, on that one word, everyone sat down. And that is the true training that we want our Khudam to have. Then when Khalifatul Masih gives you an instruction, then you say, obey on that, and immediately obey whatever the instruction is. Then Hazrat Khalifah Masih Sani in his address stated, I have repeatedly drawn the attention of the Jamaat to the point that the reformation of any nation cannot be accomplished without reforming the youth. And indeed, this is one of the banners that is at the back of this marquee today. Our organization cannot progress in the real sense until the new generations have upheld these principles of Islam that the message of Allah had established in the world. Khudam al-Ahmadiyya means the servant of Ahmadiyyat. This name will always keep them reminded that they are servants and not to be served. You must exhibit your own conduct in the best of manner. If you become a role model for the youth, it would be impossible for them to resist joining your organization. So these were the aspirations of Hazrat Khalifah Masih Sani when he started this organization, and therefore, and I know that Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, we are seeing that aspiration that he had turn into reality. Today, by the grace of Allah, Majlis Qudamlandia throughout the world, and particularly in the United Kingdom, is serving humanity to the best of their abilities. You're organizing events, you're organizing fundraising events. You were there when in the north when we had floods. You were one of the first people who went there, and I met some of the victims who came down here, and they said to us that when we saw these Asian boys turn up, we were worried. What are they doing here? And we were concerned. But the selfless way that the Khudam worked there won the hearts of the people in that area. And it is that selflessness that will win the hearts of people everywhere you go. And that is exactly what Hazrat Khalifah Masih Sani's vision was of what this organization is all about. Now, we live in the age of media. I remember when I was a young man at that stage, even the normal telephone, every house did not have it. We did not have photocopying machines. We did not have computers in the way we have computers today. And in the last 20 or 30 years, there's been an explosion in technology. And now media and technology are a very integral part of our lives. In fact, in a study quoted in the Forbes magazine, teens and young adults between the ages of 16 and 24 spend almost 200 minutes a day, almost 3 hours and 20 minutes online on various mobile devices. A further study noted that the parents underestimate how often children experience online risk, such as piracy, breaches, or information or photographs shared without permission, cyberbullying, online harassment, sexual solicitation, and exposure to explicit pornography, violent deviation, or other disturbing contents, and children aren't likely to volunteer this information until seeking their parents' help. So whilst the technology that we have is part of our life, and it can have very positive uses, because I remember when I was a very young man and I was born in Kenya, and there we used to receive the sermons of Hazrat Khalifah Masih on an audio tape, and it was such poor quality that you had to listen very carefully, and it used to be played in the mosque once a week, where you had to listen very careful to hear what Huzur Aqdus was saying. But now, by the grace of Allah, what technology has done, that every one of you can have direct contact with Khilafat on your mobile phone. And I hope that you take advantage of that, and that each and every one of you listen to Huzur's Friday sermon. Preferably, you should go to wherever you are, the mosque, to listen to Huzur's sermon. But if for some reason you can't, then Allah has blessed you now with such technology that you can, in live, you can hear Huzur's Friday sermon. And if you listen to that sermon, then you will, if at least every Friday, if you listen to that sermon, you will find that the knowledge that you receive from Huzur's blessed words will be enough for you to lead a pious and useful life in this world. And that is the true purpose of our existence. Now, with technology, there, as I mentioned, there's a whole range of issues that come up, and we as youth should be very careful. Now, one of the biggest things that is being experienced is what they call cyberbullying. And according to a study conducted by the American College of Obstetricians, 20 to 14% of adolescents reported having victims of cyberbullying. And traditional bullying and cyberbullying are associated with increased anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem in adolescents. Bullying also has been associated with other physical health effects, including stomach aches, sleep problems, headaches, tension, fatigue, and poor appetite. Meta-analysis of 33 studies concluded that being a victim of bullying is a risk factor of lower grades and standardized test scores. More recently, studies have shown that bullying is associated with increased substance abuse and violent behavior. So, just because you're Ahmadi Muslims does not mean that you can just protect yourself from being bullied on cyber links. But parents have to be very vigilant. They have to make sure that they're close enough to their children to be able to understand what the child is doing, and being involved closely with the child, that if there is any such instance, and often when bullying is taking place, children don't disclose it to their parents. And that can then lead to problems in the child's life. So for those parents who are seeing deterioration in their children, I would say to them that you should look into this to see, is there something going on in your child's life which, if the signs are that you see depression, you see the child becoming agitated, then there is something there that is causing that condition. And you must look into it to make sure that your child are not experiencing this type of condition. Then we should also be aware that on the social media and various facilities that are available on the internet now, that anything that you put up on the internet remains there forever, and it is not your personal it's not your personal thing. It is taken over by the companies who run these various facilities. And one of the things that is happening is that sometimes people can be stupid and put something on social media just as a game, but that can have consequences for the rest of your life. You know, somebody just says something in jest sometime, and it is on that social media. Later on, when you go for employment, people are able to check on the social media what you have said, what you have done, and that remains with you for the rest of your life. And if you've done something wrong, then that will remain with you for the rest of your life. Now, even the Jamaat itself now, when we invite people, for instance at Jalsa, and we invite non-Ahmadi guests to Jalsa, we are now actually going onto the social media to look at the profile of these people to make sure that there is nothing in their profile that should concern us before we allow them entry into our Jalsa. So remember that when you go into social media and you put anything out there, that you are open to scrutiny throughout your life. And we are now finding that people who have said something 10, 15 years ago, especially the politicians, when they change their mind, the newspapers immediately dig up something that was said 20 years ago and say, look, this is what you said, and this is what you truly believe in, so what you're saying now is not correct. So this is something that we as individuals need to particularly think about, that we don't get into these bad habits. So whilst technology is very important in our lives at this moment in time, but we should be very careful of what this does to you. The other thing is that I notice that research has been done on the various games that children play. Nowadays, parents feel very proud that from a very early age, they give their children, let them play games on their mobile phones. These games can be very dangerous, because what is happening is that these games can be addictive, and it is found that now in certain countries, particularly in China, they found that the youth who are playing these games up to 18 to 20 hours a day. And they were so addicted to that they couldn't let it go. So the only way they could deal with this is that now they're sending those children into the army as cold turkey to get them away from that addiction. And they say that when children play these games, their behavior becomes aggressive. Now, I'm sure that parents will recognize this, that their children who play these games, if you call them for namaz or anything, you will see that immediately there is a bit of aggression that comes out. Even the very best of children are affected by it. So parents should make sure that these games that you give to your children, you encourage them from a very early age to play, are very dangerous. So you must try and avoid such games. Also, the effect of this media is that it isolates people. People are losing the habit of talking to each other. You're saying now, incidents have been reported to me, even in Ahmadis, where a husband and wife are sitting in the same room and texting each other. Now that is criminal in my mind, that if you're sitting in the same room, you can't even talk to each other. And I'm sure that you have all experienced this. And that is the way, this media is going. So basically, what this will do eventually is that your married life will be affected. And already we are seeing cases of marriages breaking up because one of the partners is involved with such type of games, and therefore their whole life becomes upset. Now, the other thing that I just wanted to share with you is, by the grace of Allah, our Jamaat is growing, and obviously some of the issues and problems also we are seeing more of, although very, in percentage terms, very low, but still unacceptable for a Jamaat where piety and righteousness is given the most importance. What we're finding is that some of our youngsters, for various reasons, they are not getting married at the right age, or some of them who are educated are marrying outside the Jamaat, and some of the youngsters are not taking their education seriously enough, whereas the young ladies in our Jamaat are becoming more educated than some of the men, and there is an imbalance. And this is a reflection of what is happening in the society. If you look in other countries as well, I was recently looking at a study in Iran where they're seeing a similar imbalance take place. And what then happens is, when you have these imbalances, then you have an imbalance in your married life as well. So what I would say to our youth today, that you should be very conscious that you are Ahmadi Muslim youth, and you are going to be an example for the rest of the world to follow. So your conduct has to be exemplary in every aspect of your life, whether it is your matrimonial life, whether it is your academic life, whether it is your life as a volunteer. Everywhere you go, and even during this Ijtema, this is the place where you have to show through your example that you are true Ahmadi Muslims, and you aspire to those very high spiritual values that are expected of you as Ahmadi Muslims. So my prayers are that may Allah bless you during this Ijtema. May Allah enable you to raise yourself spiritually during these 3 days. And this is an opportunity for you to show yourselves as true and valuable members of the society and as role models for the rest of the world. May Allah bless you all. I wish you all a very good and happy Ijtema.